Hey YouTube, hey subscribers, thanks for tuning in. Coming at you with a very disturbing story coming out of Penn State in the United States of several charges that are facing the specific fraternity following the hazing death of one of their pledges. So we're actually going to go take a look at that story. If you're a little squeamish, or if you're very sensitive, or if you're just having a good day, this is your warning that you may not want to watch this video because it is very graphic. They go into great detail in the story, but I think it's necessary to kind of drive home the point of this particular video. So let's go take a look at that story and then come back and discuss what this all means in the context of narcissists being extremely dangerous people, mainly because they just don't know when to quit. They don't know where the limit is. They don't know where the line is, and they push and push and push and push until they cause a lot of damage. And we're going to take a look at that right now. So we have this article here, and I will link it in the description box below. Fraternity and members face hundreds of charges in Timothy Piazza hazing death. Timothy Piazza fell accidentally, but frat brothers are accused of failing to seek help and covering up what happened. The Beta Theta Pi fraternity and 18 fraternity brothers at Penn State University are facing hundreds of charges related to the hazing death of sophomore Timothy Piazza. Piazza, 19, died of his injuries after falling down the stairs in February at a pledge acceptance ceremony, CBS News reported at the time. Police attributed the fall to excessive drinking in which he partook as a result of hazing rituals for students pledging the fraternity. They noted that no one called for help until the morning after the fall. Investigators have subsequently been able to piece together what they say happened the night of Piazza's death, drawing largely on surveillance footage, witness testimony, and phone records, ABC News reports. On Friday, Centre County District Attorney issued a comprehensive report announcing charges against the fraternity and its brothers and releasing new details about what allegedly happened. Combined, the organization and 18 members are facing more than 850 charges, BuzzFeed News reports. The allegations range from involuntary manslaughter and aggravated assault to charges stemming from underage drinking and trying to cover up evidence. And there's the young man right there. Piazza fell down the stairs accidentally, his blood alcohol content somewhere between 0.28 and 0.36, according to investigators. Fraternity members had allegedly instructed pledges to drink excessive amounts as part of various rituals and games. Surveillance footage, though it did not capture the fall, shows 4 fraternity brothers carrying a bruised, seemingly unconscious Piazza upstairs at 10:47 p.m. 2 different brothers are later seen pouring liquid on Piazza's face, but he fails to respond. Others are seen turning Piazza over and lifting his limbs, all while he remains limp. Footage throughout the night shows Piazza rolling around, moving, and vomiting. Fraternity brothers can be seen employing various methods trying to keep him from rolling over or attempting to wake him up. At one point, one brother slaps in the face 3 times, and at another point, someone strikes him in the abdomen. Multiple fraternity brothers allegedly disregarded a fellow member who urged them to seek medical help, informing him the situation was under control and ultimately told him to leave. A fraternity member finally called 911 at 10:48 a.m. the next day. The caller did not state that Piazza had fallen down the stairs. When Piazza arrived at the hospital, the operating surgeon noted that Piazza's abdominal cavity contained 4 liters of old, dark blood, which the report states is about 80% of a person's total blood supply. His spleen was shattered, and he exhibited severe neurological symptoms. Piazza died 2 days later. A forensic pathologist said he suffered a base of skull fracture and multiple traumatic brain injuries and experienced respiratory failure from severe head trauma and compromised brain function. Penn State President Eric Barron called the new report heart-wrenching and incomprehensible in a statement released Friday. The alleged details in the grand jury presentment, which suggests the inhumane treatment of a student forced through hazing to consume dangerous amounts of alcohol and endure hours of suffering, are sickening and difficult to understand, Barron said. It is numbing how an atmosphere that endangers considers the well-being and safety of another person could occur within an organization that prided itself on commitment to each other and its community. Beta Theta Pi was shut down on campus back in February after the incident occurred. So all of this is just beyond tragic and senseless and heartbreaking, and it leaves people with a lot of questions like how? How could they let this happen? Why didn't they heed the advice of the person who tried to get them help? Why didn't the person who tried to get help go ahead and get help anyway? There's tons of questions that a person is left with. Hearing this story, it takes me back to when I was 19 and I had just gotten to college, and I really, really wanted to pledge a sorority. And I had my heart set on one since a certain grade in school. I knew which one I wanted to do. So as soon as I got to school, I made every effort to pledge that sorority. And I remember being turned off just by the entire process itself. Essentially, you had to, for lack of a better term, sweat the sorority. And for those of you who aren't familiar with what that means, when you sweat someone or you sweat something, it means you kind of like, you're almost like a groupie, like a fan, like you're following them around everywhere and you're constantly introducing yourself. You're trying to get noticed. You're showing up at their events and, putting your name out there. And really what makes it sweating is that your interest is not well received. So you show up to these events, you introduce yourself, and they kind of give you the cold shoulder, like, who is this peasant, or who is this nobody, and they kind of shoo you away. But the objective is to not allow yourself to be shooed away. You keep putting yourself out there, you keep going, you keep introducing yourself, and you sweat them until they finally say, okay, you can come on the line, basically. And I'll never forget how they went about it. I got a mysterious phone call around 7 o'clock on like a Friday night, and it was a girl on the other end, and she said, meet us all up at this Taco Bell in 10 minutes or something like that. It was a very short time frame, 10-15 minutes. So I kind of knew what was going on. So I was like, oh, okay, it's happening or whatever, because I had done my sweating process. And I show up to this Taco Bell, and there's about 10 other girls there, and we all kind of knew what was going on, but we weren't really talking about it because, they already had us so afraid because of the way they treated us during the sweating process. But, it's something you had your heart set on since you were a little girl. You kind of go along with it. So a couple minutes later, 3 cars show up with members of the sorority that we recognize from our sweating process. And they said, get in the car and don't say a word. So already, even in my 19-year-old self, I'm like, not feeling this. I'm like, okay, I've already sweated you and done all these things, and now I'm being kidnapped. Okay, so, but whatever, of course, I went along with it. So we get in the car, we weren't saying a word. They drive us to this apartment complex. So when we get to the apartment complex, they say, line up in height order and don't say a word. Okay, so we line up in height order. Then they lead us up these steps. They open this door and we walk in, and then all the headmasters are sitting on the couch. Their legs are crossed and they're looking very serious and angry and scary. So we walk in. We didn't say a word because we've been told not to say a word. So as soon as we had all gotten in the room, the grand headmaster or whatever, she said, wow, you all are very rude. You walk into someone else's house and you don't speak? Get out of my house. So then she kicks us all out of the house, and we're sitting there thinking, you told us not to say anything. So we're not saying anything. You told us not to say anything. We didn't, of course, we're not saying this out loud. We're thinking to ourselves, but you told us not to say anything. We're just following orders. So we walk out, they slam the door, then they open it back up so graciously, and we walk back in, and each one of us, good evening, hello, good evening, hello. So we all spoke. So then the next 2 hours consisted of us just being berated from head to toe, told that we're nothing, we're nobody. How could we even approach them? Why would we even think that they needed new members? Just completely just berating us, degrading us, trying to scare us, things like that. Then they proceeded to tell us what we weren't going to do. They were like, you are all freshmen, and I know you guys thought you're going home. You're not going home. You're going to be with us. So call your parents and tell them you're not coming home to visit. Call your friends back home and tell them you're not coming home to visit. You belong to us, right? We hadn't even crossed over. We hadn't done anything yet. This is our first meeting. They're telling us who we were, who we weren't, where we were going to go, where we weren't going to go, who we were going to hang out with, who we weren't going to hang out with. Camera phones and things weren't really, and social media wasn't even a thing thing back then. So that wasn't a topic, but it was more so of, you're not to be seen doing this, you're not to be seen doing that, you're not to be seen wearing these colors, you're not to be seen wearing those colors. So they were just telling us who we were, who we weren't, just completely dismantling our identities on the very first meeting. So I remember standing there thinking, I really wish I had drove my own car. I really wish I had drove my car up here, because I'd be out right now. But because my car is at Taco Bell and I'm essentially being held hostage right now, let me just go along with this to get along. Well, eventually, after standing up for about 2.5 hours, one of the girls fainted. One of the girls that was in line with me just completely blacked out. She passed out. And then they freaked and they were like, okay, everybody sit down, sit down. Everybody, it's okay. Go get some water, go get some water. They bring out water, they bring out Gatorade, they bring out snacks. They were like, everybody breathe, it's okay. We're just having a little fun with you guys. Like, their whole entire mood completely shifted because they knew that, okay, now something medical has just taken place because you guys are really, really going above and beyond what's necessary. So then they got real personable and started telling their stories and where they're from and how much the organization has meant to them and what it's done for them as people. And I just remember sitting there thinking, I'm not going through with this. I'm not doing this. Like, there's no way I'm going to be part of an organization that will abuse you right up to the point where you pass out and then they calm down. I'm not doing that. Like, it's just not something I'm going to do. And so I didn't. And I broke the line. And that's like a huge taboo, big no. You don't break the line. Like, if you're worthy enough to get accepted onto the line, you don't break the line. So, of course, I was shunned the rest of my college days by them, but I didn't care because I knew what they were doing to people. You're scaring girls, you're threatening them, you're taking away their identity, telling them who they are, telling them who they aren't. Why would I want to be a part of an organization like that? I have no interest in that. So, as much as it broke my heart to not pledge, I still don't regret it. And I meet a lot of people who didn't pledge and who don't regret it. And that's not knocking those of you who are part of Greek organizations. I know that they're not all like that. I know that they don't all haze. I know that every experience is not like that. And I also know that there's been a lot of benefit to some people from being part of a Greek organization. So I'm not knocking the Greeks. But what I'm saying is my experience was enough for me to say no thank you. And I turned away from it. Well, the guy I was dating at the time, he was trying to pledge also. And his was getting so bad. One night they kidnapped him in his own car. So they came to his dorm room. As soon as he opened the door, they didn't say a word. They just walked in and found his car keys and said, come on, we're going for a ride. They made him curl up in the back of his own car while they went on a joyride, basically. So he's in the trunk of his car and they're on a joyride. And they went and picked up a couple of other pledges, put them in the back of the car as well, and then eventually took them to wherever the pledge house was and proceeded to beat them for like the rest of the night. And so I told him, I said, is this really worth it to you? He got bruised so badly that a portion of his skin died and fell off. It was that bad. It got bruised really, really bad first. Then the bruise turned hard, almost like leather, and it just started to just flake off. I said, look, they've killed a portion of your skin. It's dead. Why would you want to be a part of an organization that did this to you? And eventually he dropped the line too. And I had a lot of respect for him for backing out because he made it way further in the process than I did. But these guys were punching him in the chest with all of their might. Punching him in the chest, kidnapping him in his own car. If they had gotten rear-ended, those boys could have been killed if they had gotten rear-ended in that car. So what's my point in giving you all that backstory? My point is, people who behave in narcissistic and controlling ways are very dangerous because they don't stop until they have to stop. They don't stop until the absolute limit is reached. But by then, tons of damage has been caused already. You know what I mean? They're like that driver who doesn't realize that they're causing a ton of accidents behind them because they're so oblivious to what's going on around them that they don't realize the destruction they're causing behind them until it's too late. And that's how narcissists are. They just keep going and going, keep pushing until they finally hit a limit that there's nowhere else to go. You've actually hit the ceiling. And that's usually when the consequences start to kick in for narcissists. So in the case of this frat house that's got all these charges against it right now, I guarantee you that's not the first time that has happened. Just in the past, other people woke up other people recovered, and they might have some lifelong injuries that they don't even realize are a direct result of that hazing process. So when narcissists get together and come together on one accord, it's even more dangerous. It makes me think of a story. I can't remember where it happened, but it was overseas. I think it was a bachelor party, and the guys were just joking around and threw one of their friends overboard, and he ended up dying. So it's like, how many times have you joked around like that and it was fine? The person, didn't hit their head on the way down. They swam out and they were like, hey, oh, you jerks, you assholes. And then they went on about their life. They survived. Narcissists will just keep pushing and pushing and pushing until they actually push past the point of survival. They have no limits. They have no breaking points. They have no threshold. And that's part of what makes them so very dangerous. They really don't know when to quit. So I'm proud of myself for turning away, even at that young age, turning away from what I knew was abuse in order to preserve my dignity, my self-respect, my freedom. I was 19, but I still wanted to be free. I still wanted to go home and see my parents when I wanted to see my parents, see my friends when I wanted to see my friends. I was like, I didn't come to college to be controlled like this. I came to college to be free, not to be controlled. And I was like, my parents don't even control me like this. I was going to be damned if I was going to let a group of girls who I'd never met before control me more than my own parents controlled me. So that was my personal experience with the college and the hazing process, which I didn't see getting any better from there. I remember thinking to myself, if this girl didn't pass out, what was next? Like, what was coming next? Where were they going to go with this if she hadn't fainted that night? So I wasn't interested in finding out, but that's my story. I really hope the judge is not lenient on these guys. I think it's time for an example to be made out of this type of behavior. I think this is where people are learning how to be narcissists, because if you can learn how to tolerate that type of abuse, then what kind of abuse will you be comfortable inflicting upon other people? Because you think back to how you were abused and you made it through, you pushed through, you had the willpower to push through. So then if you abuse other people, you're going to have the same expectations. Like, come on, man. I got punched in the chest repeatedly. I got beat. I got hit. I fell down a flight of stairs to be part of my organization. So you can work overtime without pay. You can take my verbal abuse. You know what I mean? Like, there's no limit. There's no end to abuse when you learn how to take abuse, and then your abuse expectations rise, because now you have high expectations of other people's thresholds when you don't realize that what you went through is not normal to begin with. So that's all I have to say on this topic. Look forward to your thoughts. Thanks so much for tuning in. And as always, I grant you the permission to exist. Bye-bye.